Friends, this is the fourth lecture in my 10 lecture series on managerial sociology. And this lecture focuses on leadership. Let me tell you that leadership has been an area of psychology, but in managerial sociology, which aims at using sociological concepts and constructs in taking better managerial decisions in different walks of life, I'm trying to give some sociological color to study of leadership. So, as usual, I will use some slides and I intend to speak for about 35-40 minutes. And later on, if you are interested, you can see my slides in more detail. So this is sociology in management and leadership studies. The content of this presentation is first, a distinction between managers and leaders, then 5 functions of management using management theory, 14 principles of management by Fayol, then types and sources of power. Leadership is about power, leadership qualities, social context of leadership, and contingency theory. Evaluation of Max Weber's theory of power. This is what sociology does. And power processes and manageability, normativity, and other interests in society. These are some resources, some books and papers which I have used in preparing this lecture. I have also used some other material, but for students who are listening to me and who are interested in these kinds of topics, this is a minimal reading. And so first, what is the relationship between managers and leaders? Now, management is about several things. Management is about running an enterprise, goal setting, supply chain relationship, human relations, accounts and finances, dealing with legal disputes, linkages with other businesses and experts, dealing with political group and policy makers, and all other things that help in the growth of the enterprise, which includes staff function, experts, legal experts, financial, and everything. But managers also have to do one thing, and that is influencing subordinates. So this influencing subordinates is part of leadership. Leadership means influencing or exercising influence on subordinators to perform. And a management guru, Fayol, in 1916, talked about 4 major functions of management: planning, organizing, staffing, controlling, directing. I'm saying that this is very similar to what a sociologist like Talcott Parsons says, that there are 4 value orientations which keep a society running: adaptation, goal attainment, integration, because from society, from time to time, there may be conflicts. So we have to have a law and such that that if people adhere to law, then many types of conflicts can be resolved. And latency or culture or socialization. Socialization is a process which, according to sociologists, keeps on going lifelong. A child is socialized to learn language, to behave with parents, to learn alphabets, and to understand the meaning of artifacts in his environment. Gradually, he goes to school. His socialization takes place in peer group and with teacher and so on. Then as school changes and the boy or the girl enters a secondary school or later on university, socialization goes on. Socialization means acquiring values and ways of doing things or norms or fashions or ideologies and making their own. So and the ultimate success of socialization depends when the values and norms of society or the environment in which we live become our own. They get internalized. So this socialization goes on. Fayol talks of 14 principles of management. I thought that we can start with some concepts of management, division of work, and this pertains obviously to industrial society, division of work, specialization, authority, discipline. Authority is something on which Max Weber has something to say. Discipline, unity of command, unity of direction, and subordination of individual interest to organizational interests, fair compensation for work for both employers and employees, and centralization, clear chain or authority or hierarchy. Max Weber also has something to say about hierarchy as part of bureaucracy, order, and Max Weber says that orders must be in writing. Equity and stability of tenure of personnel, initiative, and the common spirit or dedication. Managers are leaders. They influence subordinates. They are responsible for exchange with subordinates. They enforce the norms. They enjoy freedom to change strategies. They set an example through their values and behavior, and serve and leave the impression of serving people. This leave the impression of serving people is equally important. They serve the people, yes, but leaving the impression that they are doing something or they are advising their subordinates in the interest of subordinates also, and not merely in the interest of the organization, is also part of managers' work. They negotiate with unions, labor relations, and conflicts with trade unions and other corporations. There are today organizational managers have to interact with hundreds and thousands of other organizations. There are supra organizations, and when a significant activity is launched, launching a satellite, for example, the organization head of ISRO has to interact with thousands and lakhs of organizations and different types of bodies located in different parts of the world. So a very difficult situation. Managers work with management of other organizations and political parties. They must negotiate with political parties directly and indirectly through unions or associations of the corporate world, and they enjoy legitimate source of power. This power and influence make them leader, and other things follow. Max Weber gives a definition of power which is unique, and everybody, psychologists, sociologists, economists, whoever talks about power uses Max Weber's definition. According to this definition, the chance of a man, power is the chance of a man or a number of men. In those days, in Max Weber's time, the term man was written for both men and women. So you can say chance of a person. The chance of a person or a number of persons to realize their own will in a communal action, means in presence of others. If the concept of power does not apply if you are doing sadhana or tapasya in isolation in caves of Himalayas. But when we are working among people, in family, in organization setup, in neighborhood, in resident welfare association, in cinema hall, in railways, wherever many other people are also involved, then only we can apply the concept of power. And the power means, power is probabilistic, it's chance. So power is not deterministic. You cannot, if you are a powerful person, it does not mean that you can always realize your will. In a communal action, against the resistance of others, this is also important, resistance of others. Teachers are seen as powerful over students because students want to avoid work and teachers have to take work from them. So teachers give them quizzes, assignments, mid-sem. If students are more interested in the subject or in knowledge than teachers, then teachers will become powerless. Then students will ask questions in the class. They are well read and they know the subject well, so they can ask questions in the class for which teachers have no answer, and they will feel belittled or powerless or embarrassed. So who are participating in the action? Power is an aspect of social relationship. A person cannot be defined as powerful in isolation, and Max Weber's definition also shows that power is a zero-sum game. If power of one party or one person increases, the power of the other party decreases. There are other views on power. I will mention only two. Karl Marx, for whom power is derived from relations of production. So capitalists are powerful and the workers are powerless. Talcott Parsons has another definition of power, and to him, power belongs to society and not to persons or leaders. Power may lie in a person sometime, in a team sometime, and in an organization or in society. And power is a variable sum game. Means two or more parties, two or more groups, two or more nations can simultaneously become more powerful or less powerful. So some society, why are some societies more powerful than others? Have you ever asked this question? Why is America more powerful? Maybe a Swedish economist, Gunnar Myrdal, has something to say about this, that low-income countries are soft states and they are not able to achieve their own goals. If you are not able to achieve your own goals, you are a powerless person. Goals are your own, but you are not able to achieve. American society is able to achieve its goal of prosperity, high per capita income, industrialization, and becoming superpower in defense technology, and so they are powerful. But two or more countries can become powerful simultaneously. This is Talcott Parsons. For Max Weber, if one party becomes powerful, other party becomes powerless. But Talcott Parsons says that power can be enjoyed by two or more parties also. And when persons are powerful, political leaders, for example, it is because as you deposit your money in bank, and banks become more resourceful. Similarly, you invest your power. Power belongs to you. Power belongs to society. But society invests. Society uh, creates fixed deposits of powers in the political leader. And if they are not happy with the interest rates or they are not happy with the services of the bank, they can always withdraw their fixed deposit. They can open their fixed deposit. So likewise, they can also withdraw power from the political leader. Now, psychologists also talk of various types of powers, referent power or charismatic power. I will talk about charismatic power more in the context of Max Weber. Connection power, that you are well connected with powerful people. So in sociology, there is term, Bourdieu talks of social capital. He talks of three types of capital: physical capital or money capital, social capital, and cultural capital. So this connection power is like social capital. If you are well connected, you have connection power. Expert power through knowledge, degree, diploma, certificates, technical expertise, your technical acumen, and legitimate power which derives from status and authority. Labor commissioner is more powerful than assistant labor commissioner, and assistant labor commissioner would be more powerful than office superintendent and clerks. This derives from status and authority. It's possible that in some labor commissioner's office, some superintendent is so well connected with all kinds of people that from this connection power point of view, he is more powerful than the commissioner himself. But by and large, these are the types of power. Reward power, your ability to give power, your ability to give or withdraw rewards to subordinates or workers. Then coercive power, capacity to penalize. Reward power and coercive power are two sides of the same coin. In one case, you are able to give rewards. In another case, you can punish. In sociology, we call them positive sanctions and negative sanctions. And your ability to give positive or negative sanctions for enforcement of norms of society is what power means. And there is also information power. Some people are powerful because they have very good understanding of laws, very good understanding of history of the organization, very good understanding of what kind of technology will work, very good understanding of market, market to consumer, market to other businesses. So they become powerful. Subordinates, interestingly, in most literature we talk of power being one-sided. Some people exercising power and some people on whom power is exercised. But J.B.P. Sinha also an Indian psychologist, talks of situations in which the subordinates become more powerful than the boss. How? By providing personalized help, by getting admission of boss's son in a decent school. Subordinate becomes powerful. Threats, defiance, pseudo dependence, aapi mai baap hai, bhakti marg. Bhakti marg in India is very common by showing pseudo dependence. Actually, and this bhakti marg in India works more than Gyan marg or Karma marg. So this pseudo dependence of subordinates, yielding whatever their bosses say, they will always be first to do that work. Manipulation of information, conditions, showing respect, using tact. Some people are more tactful than others, so they become powerful. And asking for cautiousness, advise, sometimes advising, warning the boss for taking certain action or not taking certain action, that also makes them powerful. And upward appeal means they can go to court, they can go to higher bosses, they can go to government, they can file an RTI, and some people are known for being nuisance for these things. In all organizations, there are some people, for any small pretext, they will go for RTI or they will go to labor court or other courts. And normally bosses want to avoid them, so bosses keep them happy. This is also a source of power, upward appeal. There are leadership qualities. Initially, literature talked about physical qualities, that zamindars look very different from ordinary workers physically. Then psychological traits of personality factors. Then researchers started looking at leadership from the lens of effectiveness, and then behavior. What kind of behavior will make them effective or ineffective? Then situation. Situation is equally important. Mahatma Gandhi's power fluctuated several times between 1920s and 1940s, depending on the social conditions of protest. Sometimes Mahatma Gandhi was a very powerful person. Sometimes he was completely ignored. He was ignored even by Congress party. And suddenly he comes to center stage of Bharat Chodo Andolan, and then again close to independence. He is an isolated person, highly frustrated, dejected. He was not able to achieve what he wanted to achieve. He was not able to achieve Hindu-Muslim unity. He was not able to achieve equality or a casteless society. So he became powerless and he started concentrating on constructive work and on naturopathic experiments and Ram Nam. So it depends. Arjun was a very powerful person in Mahabharata, but there also comes a time when Arjun is defeated by a small tribal boy. There are interpretations of that, but the fact remains that Arjun was not always powerful. Krishna was not always powerful. And there are stories that toward the end of his life, Krishna was highly dejected and isolated. And when he used to hear what is happening in new form state of Pandavas, he felt bad. Then leadership can also be seen from the lens of authenticity, values, and from dynamic perspective. As society changes, as organization changes, so many changes take place in organization. So then style and behavior and ideas of power should also change. And today we live in a society which is uncertain and complex. It requires certainly a different type of power style. In psychology, people talk of different types of traits. These what makes one a good leader: energy, empathy, flexibility, integrity, communication ability, productivity, and so on. There are approaches when attention shifts from traits to approaches. Some people use skill approach, behavioral approach, situational approach, path goal theory, leader member exchange theory, authentic leaders, transformational leadership, servant leadership, adaptive leadership, psychodynamic approach, which is based on Freudian theory that the subordinates will be suffering from anxiety, depression, stress, what kind of approach to use in those situations based on Freud and other approaches. This is an open area of research and researches are still going on. In psychology, people also talk of this Black and Newton's grid. On x-axis is the concern for results, on y-axis concern for people. Some people are high at concern for results. They ignore subordinates' interests, and there are some people who are high at subordinates' interests, and they do not mind if work suffers. Actually, ideally, a manager should be 5-5 and give equal importance or middle level of importance to both people and work. X-axis work, y-axis people. So 5-5 means both people and work are equal important. So you give importance to people because then they are able to perform better. And this idea that you give importance to people so that they perform better is best produced by the concept of nurture and task leadership by a psychologist in India whose name was J.V.P. Sinha. Nurture and task leadership. This study was done in government of Bihar. Later on, his students, he has so many students in social psychology and in organization behavior who have applied this nurture and task leadership and who have evolved new concepts like LMX by Kanika Tandon in IIT Delhi. He works in management department. So let me use a quote from J.V.P. Sinha, Nurture and Task, so that you can understand in Indian situation what is one possible style of leadership that works. That he as person, he as well as she. He is a task oriented. That is, he requires the task must be completed. The subordinates understand and accept the goals and normative structure of the organization and introject them. He structures his as well as that of his subordinates' roles clearly so that communications are explicit, structured, and task relevant. He initiates, guides, and directs his subordinates to work so as to maintain high level of productivity. Responsibilities are pinpointed and areas of decision making are synchronized with them. He thus creates a climate of purposiveness and goal orientation. Let me again summarize in one or two sentences that this nurture and task leader Professor Sinha is talking about is a leader who takes interest in subordinates' welfare, but makes the task conditional to subordinates' interest, to bestow various kinds of favors on the subordinates. If subordinates do well, then the leader is interested in their welfare. He is not interested in labor's welfare if the labor does not comply. or those people. He gives more rewards. He gives more wages, promotion, appreciation, and all kinds of rewards to people who comply with his orders or his instructions or rules framed in the interest of the organization. In sociology, something parallel attempt has been made by Marx and Max Weber and other writers. And Max Weber is one of the most important sociologists of 19th century, sorry, 20th century. The theory of, he gives the theory of bureaucracy. Some people say that Max Weber provides a critique of all kinds of theories of Karl Marx. And here also, he criticizes a two-class model of Karl Marx, capitalists on the one hand and workers on the other. And he gives a theory of bureaucracy that all industrial organizations, according to Max Weber, whether it is capitalist society, it is socialist society, it is communist society, or any other kind of society, all societies will have to run on the basis of some kind of bureaucracy. And what is bureaucracy? Bureaucracy means going according to rules. In one slide, okay, let me first show this, that Max Weber talks of three types of action. Then I will come to bureaucracy. Max Weber talks of three types of action. One is rational, a belief in the legality of statutory orders and the right of those appointed to exercise rule to give directions. Traditional, an everyday belief in the sanctity of long-established traditions and legitimacy of those whose authority derives from these traditions. So normative power kind of. And charismatic manner, the exceptional sanctity or heroic quality or exemplary character of a person. Character of a person. Remember this, character of a person and of the orders that this person proclaims or creates. Charismatic leader. Now, where rule is statutory, the legal, formulated, substantive, impersonal order. This is what bureaucracy means, rule of law. And the person thereby appointed to exercise authority by this order are obeyed by virtue of the formal legality of the ordinances and the domain over which they have force. In the case of traditional rule, obedience is owed by virtue of piety and familiarity with the person of the ruler appointed by the tradition and bound by it. In the case of charismatic rule, the charismatic leader acquires this role by virtue of personal trust in revelation, heroism, or exemplary qualities within the domain where belief in such charisma prevails. Examples. Authority of father, authority of husband, authority of grandfather, authority of Brahmin, authority of priest in church or in Hindu temples, or authority of father, authority of Christian father, I mean, authority of all kinds which derive from norms. So maybe at one time Jamindar has a traditional authority because he was Jamindar. According to norms of that region, he was Jamindar, so he had traditional authority. Rational authority is authority which uses rational calculations, which decides which strategy will serve the interest best, there are so many strategies to achieve the same goal. Which strategy will achieve the goal in a best, most effective and most efficient manner? That is the authority called rational authority. And director of a business school may be enjoying that rational authority. He also enjoys status. Status, his power lies in status and role. And that is a rational authority. We have created a bureaucratic kind of system in education, assuming that those who occupy different positions act according to rules of those positions and they serve the interest of the society well. But interestingly, there are some people who are neither traditionally powerful, nor they enjoy status, power, and rational authority, and still they are powerful. Gandhi, for example, Gandhi was a leader of charismatic type. He was not a Brahmin. He was not a very moneyed kind. He was not a capitalist. He was not the only educated person from the West. There were so many. And he was not a feudal lord. He did not inherit any political organization. So, in whatever influence he had, it was his own influence, and he could emotionally relate to all kinds of people: students, farmers, teachers, freedom fighters, political parties, even to British people. Several of the British authorities were his great friends. This emotional power of Gandhi made him a charismatic charismatic leader. Sai Baba was a charismatic leader. Jesus was a charismatic leader. Napoleon was a charismatic leader. I would even say that Hitler was a charismatic leader. Hitler, you may like Hitler or you may not like Hitler, but the point is that at some point of time, Hitler was able to change the psychology of German people who were most hurt in the context of wars, and Germany was defeated, and they were embarrassed, and they were ashamed of their status in the world, in the global situation. And Hitler gave them this idea that it is possible for German people to become a great nation once again. And using that emotion and connecting to all Germans emotionally without any traditional or rational source of power, he became a great power. So he was a charismatic authority. Charismatic authority can be good or bad, and that is why Max Weber gives more importance to rational authority rather than charismatic or traditional kind. Tradition is going, and rationality is coming. So that is a fact of life in all walks of life, in industry, in education, in services, in health, in insurance, even in NGOs, non-profit making organizations, community organizations, resident welfare organizations. Everywhere authority is coming. So the aim of bureaucracy is to create an organization of roles to attain the most efficient way of attaining goals in state, education, religion, military, political parties, and both capitalist and socialist society. Lenin's Russia, as well as US and Northwestern European countries, uh, China, today China, all countries are run on the basis of bureaucracy. The main characteristics of bureaucracy, according to Max Weber, the regular activities required for the purposes of the organization are distributed in a fixed way as official duties. For example, Indian government is divided into ministries, and ministries are divided into departments. The organization of offices follows the principle of hierarchy: high, low, who is above whom. That is, every lower office is under the control and supervision of a higher one. Third, operation governed by a consistent set of abstract rules. The rules define the scope and limits of authority at all levels. Strict rules and controls defined. And also, the ideal official acts with a spirit of formalistic authority, without hatred or passion. When we as a professor select a new person, a new assistant professor, we go strictly according to rules and merit. It's possible that there is someone, because of some reason we like him, but he does not get selected. And it may be that there is someone whom we do not like for some reason, but he gets selected. We have to go according to rules. And that is why there is a bureaucratic committee. There are 4 or 5 experts, director, deans, and everyone to select the person, so that there is no bias and people are not selected on the basis of likings and dislikings. Business to be conducted according to rules and without regard of persons. And officials are appointed on the basis of technical knowledge. For the employee, the occupation is a career, promotion is based on seniority or achievement or a combination of both. Now, this concept of power of Max Weber is not that by Foucault, who shows that power depends on knowledge, or all kinds of knowledge systems create different kinds of power systems. And lastly, there is a strict separation of private and official income. Bureaucracy separates official activity from private life. So you may be a bank cashier, and someday, for some reason, you may need money. Somebody is ill in the family, or you are constructing a house and you need some money for modification, for construction of some parts of the house, or you want to celebrate something at home, so you need money. But as a cashier, you may be handling lakhs and crores of rupees in the bank, but you have no right, and you do not take, you are not expected to take any money from the bank for your personal purpose. This use of official power for personal purposes, official resources for personal purposes, comes under corruption. This is white collar corruption. And bureaucracy separates official activity from private life. Now, Max Weber also says that bureaucracy may vary from one type of organization to another. Organizations like academic institutions will have a more flexible bureaucracy. Banks, party bureau, entertainment industry or government organizations, non-government organizations, community organizations, movements, they have different types of bureaucratic styles. Bureaucracy, some rules are there, but there is flexibility in some and not in others. Long-term or short-term planning, you give more importance to long-term planning or short-term planning, according to which, if you give more importance to short-term planning, then you have to adhere to bureaucratic rules more. If you give long-term, if you go for long-term planning, you have to give importance to visionaries also, and you allow visionaries to deviate from the rules of the game. You also give importance to whistleblowers. Static or dynamic targeting, bureaucrats in government may focus on avoiding errors, often leading to rat tapeism. Merton was a person who gave a theory of rat tapeism, that bureaucracy can create rat tapeism sometimes, and especially among lower levels, lower ranks of bureaucrats, because they want to play safe, becoming oblivious of the interests of the organization or the department. So they are, Merton wanted to say that everyone is some kind of conformist and some kind of deviant when they are conforming to norms, or they are not taking any decision, and they are in a position not to take any decision. They are conforming to, they are playing safe, conforming to rules of what means playing safe, but they are oblivious of the goals of the organization. In that way, they are deviating from some kind of norms of the organization, that goals must be achieved. Now, Max Weber theory has some limits too, and therefore you need to ponder on Max Weber and develop a new theory of power, a new theory of leadership in the light of Max Weber. Max Weber says that although we are a bureaucratic society, we are in the iron cage of bureaucracy, but the whole process of rationalization is irrational. Means we do not know in which direction we are going. So country may be progressing, but we cannot always say that it's good for the mankind or for people or for all kinds of people. It is aimless, bureaucracy is aimless, rationalization is aimless, devoid of traditional values which give meaning and purpose to life. Prevents spontaneity, creativity, and individual initiative, means agency, not suited for sudden change in the environment. Sometimes environment changes, sometimes expectations from the organization change, sometimes organization creates new goals also. And if you become Lakir ka Fakir, if you simply adhere to rules, that may not be good for the organization. So, so that means bureaucracy, the concept which is given by Max Weber, has to interact with society and other interests. What kind of bureaucracy you must have? A flexible bureaucracy, strict bureaucracy, or if you can develop some scale of bureaucracy, where will you be on the scale? That depends on your interaction, your organization's interaction in with society, in what kind of society you live, and in global situation or other interests. In the age of globalization, in the situation when you have to compete with and you have to cooperate with so many global, national, international organizations, and so many things are happening at the international level, sustainable development goals, and concern about carbon emission. ILO says one thing, World Bank says something, Government of India says something. There are changes in laws. Recently, labor laws have been changed. So all these things and what other parties are doing, what your competitors are doing, all these things determine whether and what kind of bureaucracy is more suited to your organization. Now, towards the end, I must also say that Max Weber is very relevant for us, most known for his methodological contribution towards subjective meanings behind human action. He is the first and foremost person to say that in order to understand action or to change somebody's action, or to use modern phraseology for behavioral change communication, you must first understand what meaning is assigned by an actor to his action. All the societal level status and power dimensions of stratification are more recognized. Max Weber has a multi-class model. He does not, like Karl Marx, he does not divide society into two groups only, a capitalist group and the workers. He thinks that in between there are many other groups. And he also divides people on the basis of status and power. So status, power, and class. Max Weber's division of society is on the basis of three dimensions. These three dimensions, status, power, and class, and their interaction will decide whether an organization or what strategies or what kind of societies will be effective or not. Then role of emotions, Max Weber would recognize role of emotion and charismatic leaders, but he has not done much work on this. So I suggest that in your work, there is a whole branch of sociology of emotions today. In postmodern literature, there is sociology of emotions, and you can add to Max Weber's literature by adding concepts and ideas from sociology of emotions. And one such concept is emotional burden. It's a very powerful concept. Now, in limited time, I'm not able to go through all the concepts, but you must try to explore the concept of emotional burden for managers and workers. Thank you. This is what I wanted to say. Friends, this lecture is about leadership. First of all, I say that leadership differs from other managerial functions. Management has to do so many things, but when we discuss leadership, we discuss only one dimension of management, and that is influencing subordinates, or motivating them, or raising their morale, or taking work from them, or I would even say that transformational leadership will raise the socio-cultural, economic standards, spirituality standards of the workers, so that in the long term for the organization, these workers become more useful. They can also change the goals and the values of the organization to make them effective, more effective in the long run. I have taken help of psychology literature to discuss leadership in terms of physical characteristics, which is very old concept. Nowadays, we don't think that, and nobody will say that to become an efficient or effective IAS officer, you must be very tall or you must be short. Anybody is short or tall. Short and tall can be very good prime ministers, and irrespective of weight and irrespective of physical features or hairstyle or other types of physical property. People can be good or bad. So we talk mostly of qualifications. We talk of behavior. We talk of intelligence, emotional intelligence, emotions. Emotions is one field which has been ignored in psychological theories of leadership, which has been ignored in Max Weber also. Although Max Weber goes to the extent the subjective meanings must be understood, but Max Weber also does not talk about emotions much. You must consider sociology of emotions, which is an emerging branch of study, and you must also take interest in spirituality, individual spirituality, organizational spirituality. There is a lot of literature on this, and to become a good leader, you should not only be good expert and well connected and a technical expert, but you should also know what emotional, spiritual, what strategies need to be used in a particular situation. The same person can be effective in one situation and ineffective in another situation. The situations are also. Indira Gandhi was very effective sometimes. Indira Gandhi was absolutely helpless in some other situation. Gandhi, same case with Gandhi, same case with almost all great leaders. So develop a holistic, at the end I would say that have a holistic theory of leadership, combining rationality, intelligence, emotions, spirituality, and still there will be something which cannot be explained. Great leaders are great leaders because they have some charisma of their own. Thank you very much.